Every morning I wake up with the first rays of the sun. It's an old builder's habit to start the day at dawn. Even now that I'm 67 and have been retired for 5 years, my body refuses to sleep past 6 in the morning. Today is no exception. I'm lying in my single bed, listening to Calabasas waking up outside the window, the quiet town I've chosen for my old age. My name is Hugh Baxter. All my life, I've been building houses for other people, and I've done it damn well. I started out as a simple carpenter and ended up owning a small but respected construction company. Baxter Construction wasn't the most original name, but it said it all. When a job is done by Baxter, it's done with integrity. I rise slowly, feeling my knees aching. Payback for decades spent on construction sites. My current home is a modest one-story cottage with 2 bedrooms and a small garden. It is 10 times smaller than the mansion I built for my family in northern Calabasas, the one where my son Noel and his wife Paige now lived. As I pour myself my first cup of coffee, I glance at the picture on the refrigerator. Elaine. My Elaine, who left us 6 years ago. Cancer didn't give her a chance, despite all the money I was willing to pay for treatment. After she died, the big house became unbearable for me. Too many memories, too much emptiness. That's when I decided to sign the house over to Noel. He's our only son, 37, and it seemed right to secure his future. Elaine always said I was too hard on the boy. Maybe she was right. I was never good at expressing my feelings, always stingy with praise. Work, responsibility, honesty. That's what I tried to instill in him, maybe a little too hard. I remember the day I handed him his papers. We were sitting at the dining room table, the one I had made with my own hands from cherry wood before he was born. "The house is yours now," I said, sliding the folder over. "Take care of it." Noel looked at the papers in disbelief. "Just like that? No strings attached?" I shrugged. "You're my son. Who else should I leave him to?" He didn't say thank you. He just nodded, as if he'd gotten something he'd been owed for a long time. Maybe he did. What I hadn't told him then was that my lawyer, Felix Prescott, had thoughtfully drawn up the paperwork so that although Noel could live in the house and consider it his own, legally I retained ownership. A simple insurance policy which Felix insisted was common practice. "You've put your soul into this house, Hugh. Let it be yours until you decide otherwise." I push the memories away and step out onto the porch with my coffee. My current home is a 15-minute drive from the mansion, far enough away so I don't accidentally bump into each other, but close enough to drive if you need me. Will you need me? I doubt it. Over the last 5 years, my relationship with Noel has only gotten worse. We see each other at Christmas and Thanksgiving, exchange birthday phone calls. Conversations are strained, full of awkward pauses and unspoken grievances. Noel has always been a sensitive child, too much like his mother, too different from me. I wanted him to follow in my footsteps, to learn the value of work calluses. He chose college and an office job, became a digital marketing specialist, whatever that means. When he brought Paige into our home, I genuinely tried to like her. She seemed like a nice girl, bright, energetic, with a university degree and a job at some advertising firm. Elaine liked her immediately. "She makes him smile, Hugh. Isn't that the main thing?" But there was something in her gaze that alarmed me. Too evaluating, too calculating. I'd seen her looking around our house, estimating the value of every item. I'd seen her attitude toward me change after Elaine's death, when I'd announced my decision to step aside and turn the company over to my deputy, Roland Travis. I didn't sell the business. I simply stepped back from operational management, retaining a controlling interest in regular income. Paige considered this a mistake. "The company could have been sold for millions," she once said over dinner, not to me, to Noel, but loud enough for me to hear. Their wedding was lavish and expensive. I paid the bills without objection. A wedding trip to Bali, a new car as a gift. I did everything I thought a good father would do. But every year Noel became more and more distant. And Paige. Paige became more and more blatantly intolerant of my presence in their lives. I could chalk it up to a young family's natural desire for privacy. But there was something else. A gradual change in Noel's behavior. He became irritable, nervous. He started missing family dinners, where we had agreed to meet once a month. And when he did show up, he often smelled of whiskey. I tried to talk to him about it. "Are you all right, son?" He waved it off. "Everything's fine, Dad. Just a lot of work." Work. 3 months ago, I learned that his company had made massive layoffs. Noel lost a position he was so proud of. He didn't tell me about it. I heard it from a mutual acquaintance. When I called my son, he was brief. Temporary difficulties. I'm dealing with it. I finish my coffee and head back into the house. It's 8 in the morning. The day promises to be hot. I plan to work in the garden and then maybe drive to my group meeting, a few of the same retired former builders and contractors. We get together once a week at a local diner, reminisce about the old days and complain about the present, the small joys of a lonely old man. The phone rings as I pull on my work gloves. The number is unfamiliar, but local. Hugh Baxter speaking. Mr. Baxter. This is Vivian Holbrook, your son's neighbor. We met at a barbecue a couple of years ago. I vaguely recall an older woman with impeccably styled gray hair. She lived across the street. "Yes, Mrs. Holbrook. What can I do for you?" She hesitates and it makes me tense. Maybe I'm minding my own business, but I thought you should know. Something's going on with your son. I'm taking off my gloves and sitting down. "What do you mean?" "For the past few weeks," she pauses again. "There's been yelling, loud arguments, sometimes in the middle of the night. And yesterday I saw him sitting in the driveway. Just sitting there in the middle of the day with a bottle. When his wife came home from work, they were yelling at each other again. I could feel the chill in my chest. Did you talk to him?" "I tried. He was, not himself. You know, my late husband struggled with alcoholism for 20 years. I know what it looks like." I thank her for calling and promise to look into it. After hanging up, I sit still for a long time. Part of me wants to go there immediately. The other part reminds me of how Noel reacted to my previous attempts to interfere in his life. "I don't need your lectures, Dad. I'm not one of your workers." I look at Elaine's picture. What would she do? The answer's obvious. She would have been in the car by now. I gather my wits and dial my son's number. 1 ring, 2, 3, voicemail. "You've reached Noel Baxter. Please leave a message." "Noel, it's Dad. I was wondering, maybe we could get together. Have lunch or I don't know what else to say. Call me back, okay?" I hang up and realize I've broken the routine. He's usually the one who calls me when I need money or help with something around the house. I rarely take the initiative for fear of being rejected, but now something tells me to take action. 5 minutes later, I'm already in my old Ford pickup truck, heading toward the north end of town where the mansion is located. The house I built for Elaine, a 2-story Spanish colonial-style building with a red tile roof and white walls. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a spacious kitchen with the island she'd always dreamed of. A living room with high ceilings and a stone fireplace that I stacked myself, stone by stone. The patio overlooking the garden where she grew her roses. Every inch of this house holds our memories. Noel's first steps. Christmas mornings. Quiet evenings in the backyard when Elaine and I sat hand in hand watching the sunset. I gave that house to my son because I could no longer be there without her. And because I wanted a piece of Elaine to always be with him. She put so much love into that house. Every detail of the interior, every corner of the garden. I wonder if her roses are still there. Does Paige take care of them? I doubt it. The last time I was there, the backyard looked neglected. Pulling up to a familiar neighborhood, I slow down. Part of me is still questioning if I'm doing the right thing. Noel has always valued his independence. My sudden appearance could only make things worse. But as I turn onto their street, the doubts recede. In the driveway of the house across the street, I see an elderly woman trimming a hedge. Vivian Holbrook. She notices my car and nods faintly. I park in front of the house and just sit there for a few minutes, gathering my thoughts. The house looks a little neglected. The paint on the window frames is peeling. The lawn hasn't been mowed in a while. But the most noticeable thing is the broken side window, taped up with tape and cardboard. This is not the house I passed on to my son. Not the house his family should be living in. I get out of the car and walk slowly to the front door. I can feel my heart pounding. What am I going to say? How will Noel react? And Paige. Before I can press the bell, the door swings open. Paige is standing there. Her blonde hair is in a casual bun, her makeup flawless despite the early hour. She's wearing a business suit, probably going to work. Hugh? She doesn't hide her surprise, and she doesn't seem particularly happy to see me. What are you doing here? Hello, Paige. I called Noel, but he didn't answer. I thought I'd stop by and check on you. She tenses, glances over her shoulder. This isn't a good time. I'm late for work, and Noel, she stammers. Noel's not feeling well. I hear he's having trouble at work. Paige's face stiffens. Who told you that? Does it matter? I'm his father. Why should I have to hear about these things from outsiders? She sighs with feigned patience. Hugh, you know Noel. He doesn't like to show weakness, especially in front of you. It hits a sore spot, and she knows it. Can I come in? I ask, ignoring the jab. Paige hesitates, then reluctantly backs away. Just for a little while, okay? I have an important presentation today. I walk into the house and immediately notice the changes. The furniture that Elaine and I chose so lovingly is gone, replaced by modern, angular pieces. The walls, once adorned with family photos, are now bare except for a few abstract paintings. The house looks like a page from a design magazine. Stylish, impersonal, and cold. Where's Noel? I ask, looking around. Upstairs. Sleeping, Paige answers briefly, adjusting her earrings. Look, Hugh, I'm really late. What happened to the window? I interrupt, nodding toward the side window that's taped shut with cardboard. She looks away for a moment. An accident. Noel. He was upset. He punched her. I can feel the anxiety rising inside. Paige, what's going on? I know Noel lost his job. I know you're in trouble. We're not in trouble, she replies sharply. Noel's just having some temporary difficulties, that's all. He'll find a new job. In the meantime, I have to provide for both of us, and I can't afford to be late. I look at her more closely. Behind the flawless facade, I see fatigue and tension. Maybe even fear. I can help, I say quietly. Financially, I mean, until Noelle gets back on her feet. Her face softens for a moment, but then she shakes her head. Thank you, but no. Noel will never accept money from you. You know his pride. His pride can wait if you're barely making ends meet. We're getting by, she says. Look, I really have to go. I'll tell Noel you stopped by. She's just about to open the door, making it clear that our conversation is over, when there's a rumble from upstairs, followed by a muffled curse. Paige flinches. Noelle, I call out, heading for the stairs. Hugh, please. Paige blocks my path. This isn't the time. He's not in the right state of mind. I'm halfway up the stairs when I hear her last words. Trust me, you don't want to see him like this. But I have to. I have to see what's become of my son and what's become of the house I built for my family. I found Noel in his study, a former guest bedroom converted into a home office. He was sitting on the floor, leaning against the wall with a bottle of whiskey in his hand. An overturned chair lay nearby, the source of the noise I'd heard. My son looked terrible, a droopy face with a week's worth of stubble, inflamed eyes, a stale t-shirt. He looked at me with a look of surprise that quickly changed to annoyance. What the hell are you doing here? His voice was hoarse, with the characteristic slurring of a man who'd been drinking for days. I came to see my son, I answered, trying to keep my voice calm. What's going on, Noel? He grinned wryly. A family visit? Now? Where have you been for the last 5 years? I've always been around. You know that. He took a sip straight from the bottle. I know. The great Hugh Baxter, always ready to point out where I've gone wrong. I took a deep breath, holding back my irritation. This was an old conversation that never led to anything good. I hear you're having trouble with your job. Fired. Downsized. What difference does it make? He shrugged with exaggerated indifference. 15 years with the company, and just like that. Goodbye, Mr. Baxter. Your services are no longer required. Are you looking for a new job? He snorted. Of course I am. I send out resumes every single day. In between binges, he raised the bottle as if making a toast. You know how many responses I've gotten? None. Absolutely none. I walked over to him and squatted gingerly beside him. Let me help you. How? Will you get me a job at your company? I'm sorry, but I don't know how to lay bricks. It's not about bricks, Noel. I have connections. People who could... No, he interrupted me abruptly. I won't be your charity project. I won't owe you any more than I already do. At that moment, Paige appeared in the doorway, already wearing a coat and carrying a purse. I'm leaving, she announced, looking at Noel. Try not to trash the house while I'm gone. Noel didn't answer. She shifted her gaze to me. Don't stay too long, Hugh. He needs to rest. After she left, we sat in silence. I noticed that the room was cluttered with papers, empty bottles, and dirty plates. There was a computer with a dark screen on the desk and a whiteboard with notes and diagrams hanging on the wall, the remnants of some project now abandoned. How long has this been going on? I finally asked. Noel sighed. I lost my job 3 months ago. Started drinking around the same time. And Paige, he closed his eyes. It's hard with Paige. She's angry. She has a right to be. I stayed silent, waiting for him to continue. I let her down, he continued in a quieter voice. She married a successful man with prospects. She got an unemployed alcoholic who can't pay his bills. Are you coping financially? He grinned bitterly. Barely. Her salary is enough to pay the mortgage and utilities. There's not much left for food, and she needs to maintain a certain level. Clothes, salons, lunches with coworkers. You know how it is. I did, and it bothered me. The house had been paid off a long time ago. I'd taken care of that before I handed it over to Noel. There shouldn't be any mortgage. What mortgage? I asked cautiously. Noel opened his eyes and looked at me in surprise. We remortgaged the house 2 years ago. We took out a loan for renovations and some investments. I felt my insides clench. They remortgaged the house I built with my own hands for my family, a house that I'd given them for free. And how was that investment? Noel looked away. Not great. Paige knew a guy who was involved in some tech startups. Seemed promising. I closed my eyes. It was a classic scheme. How many times had I seen people lose everything on such promising investments? At that moment, I made a decision. My son needed help, whether he wanted to admit it or not. I'm moving in with you, I said firmly, temporarily, until you're back on your feet. Noel straightened up sharply. What? Number? Absolutely not. It's out of the question. You need help, and I'm here to provide it. Paige will object. I'll talk to Paige. He looked at me with a long stare, and for a moment I saw in him that little boy who used to come to me with his problems and troubles. Then his face hardened again. Do whatever you want. You always do. That was the end of our conversation. I helped him up and walked to the bedroom. He collapsed on the bed with his clothes on and fell asleep almost instantly. I covered him with a blanket like I did when he was a kid and then went back to my house to pack. By late afternoon, I returned with a small suitcase. Paige met me at the door with an expression of extreme disapproval. Noel said you were going to stay, she said instead of greeting me. Temporarily, I nodded. He needs help, Paige. She crossed her arms over her chest. And you think your presence is going to help? He's only going to drink more. I'm not going to control him. I just want to be there for him, she snorted. Of course you do. Great caring father. Where were you when he was getting fired? Or when we were losing money on those damn investments? You didn't tell me. Did you ask? I swallowed the harsh answer. She was right in a way. I'd kept my distance, respecting their space. Maybe a little too much. I'm here now, I said simply. Where can I position myself? Paige sighed with defiant irritation. The guest room. Second door on the right upstairs. She paused. And Hugh? Don't think that changes anything between us. With those words, she turned and went into the kitchen. I went upstairs to the guest room, a small room that had once been my home office. Now there was a single bed, a dresser, and a small desk. The walls were bare except for an abstract painting similar to the ones hanging downstairs. I laid out my things and sat on the bed, feeling strange in the house that had once been mine. Everything seemed both familiar and foreign at the same time. Same walls, same windows, but a completely different atmosphere. During the first few days of my stay, an awkward rhythm established itself. Paige would leave for work early in the morning and return late at night. Noel spent most of the day in his office, ostensibly sending out resumes and interviewing online. I was doing what I did best, taking care of the house. I started with minor repairs, replacing a broken window, fixing a leaky faucet in the bathroom, fixing cracks in the garage walls. Then I moved on to the neglected garden, mowed the lawn, trimmed the bushes, weeded the flower beds. To my surprise, a few rose bushes Elaine had planted were still struggling for life among the weeds. I freed them, pruned and fertilized them, hoping they would bloom again. Noel watched my efforts with silent skepticism. Sometimes he would go out into the yard with a bottle of beer and sit in the shade watching me work. Several times I tried to engage him by offering to help, but he always declined. "I've never been good at this stuff," he'd say, sipping his beer. "Remember when I tried to help you build that barn when I was 15? I remembered. He hammered 8 nails and broke 2 hammers before I sent him back to the house to help his mother." "Practice makes the master," I replied, wiping the sweat from my forehead. He only shook his head. "Some things are in the blood, Dad. You have it, I don't." By the end of the first week, I noticed that Noel was drinking less. Not that he'd stopped altogether, but he'd switched from whiskey to beer, and he wasn't falling asleep, drunk asleep every night. Small victory. Things were more complicated with Paige. She clearly considered my presence an intrusion and never missed a chance to show it. Cold stares, sarcastic comments, blatant ignoring at the dinner I cooked every night. One night, as I was preparing dinner, I heard the front door slam. Paige had come home from work and, judging by the clomping of her heels, was not in the best of moods. She walked into the kitchen and stopped when she saw me at the stove. "What's that?" she asked, sniffing. "Lasagna. Elaine's recipe," I answered without turning around. "Noel had always loved it." "That's nice," her voice oozed sarcasm. "Recreating the family idyll?" I turned to her, trying to stay calm. "Just making dinner, Paige. Nothing more." She tossed her bag on the table and walked over to the refrigerator, pulling out a bottle of wine. "You know what I'm curious about," she said, pouring herself a glass. "Why you've suddenly become such a caring father. Where were you when Noel really needed you? When he was a teenager, for example." "I was always there for him. Physically, maybe. But emotionally?" She took a sip of wine. "He told me how you missed his school events because of work, how you criticized his career choices, how you compared him to your own ideal standards. Her words hurt me because there was some truth to them. I was indeed a demanding father, perhaps too demanding. I did what I thought was right," I said quietly. "Maybe not always perfectly, but I loved him and wanted the best for him." "And what was the best? For him to be a carbon copy of you?" I took a deep breath, fighting my irritation. "For him to become an independent, responsible man, to appreciate hard work and honesty, to be able to take care of his family." Paige laughed, a cold, unpleasant laugh. "How did that work out? Look at him now." I turned toward her, feeling the anger rising in me. "And look at you, Paige. You're both responsible for what happens in your life. Not just Noel, not just me. You're responsible too." She set her glass down abruptly. "Don't you dare blame me. I'm the one keeping this family afloat. Spending money on designer clothes when you can barely pay your bills?" Her face contorted with rage. "Get out," she screamed. "Get out of my house. Pay your rent or get out." At that moment, Noel entered the kitchen, attracted by the shouting. "What's going on in here?" Paige turned to him, still seething with anger. "Your father thinks he can tell me how to spend the money I make." Noel looked from her to me and back again, clearly not knowing which side to take. "Shabanimwak, Paige, he's just trying to help." "I don't need his help. I don't need his judgment either." She grabbed her bag and headed for the exit. "I'm not going to sit here and be lectured by a man who couldn't even raise his own son properly." With these words, she jumped out of the kitchen. A few seconds later, we heard the front door slam. Noel sank heavily into a chair. "I'm sorry," he said tiredly. "She's not always like this. It's just complicated right now." I nodded, going back to cooking. "I understand. Stress does weird things to people. We ate dinner together in relative silence. After dinner, Noel helped me clear the table. A small gesture that meant more to me than he'd realized. You know, he said when we were done, maybe it wasn't such a bad idea for you to move here. I looked at him in surprise. Really? He shrugged his shoulders. Yeah, I needed help. I'm just too proud to admit it. I put my hand on his shoulder and he didn't pull away. Another small victory. We'll get through this, son. Together. Paige came back late that night. I could hear her quietly walking up the stairs, trying not to make any noise. In the morning, she acted as if nothing had happened. Coldly polite, but without overt hostility. Since that evening, however, something has changed. Her glances in my direction became more intense, assessing. Her comments more sarcastic. It was as if she were looking for conflict. Noel was caught between two fires. I could see him agonizing, trying to please both her and me. I've seen him try not to take sides in our silent confrontations. But more importantly, I saw Paige slowly turning him against me. Little comments thrown in, as if by the way. Questions that made him question my motives. Reminders of past hurts and disappointments. Remember when he missed your graduation because of an important meeting? I overheard him walking past their bedroom one day. And now all of a sudden he's Father of the Year. I didn't stop to hear Noel's response. Some things are better left unsaid. It had been almost a month since I had moved in with Noel and Paige. Every day I've watched their lives, trying to help and not interfere too much at the same time. It hasn't been easy. My habit of controlling and fixing everything clashed with their desire for autonomy, especially on Paige's part. Noel had been working for the construction company for 3 weeks now, an entry-level position in the marketing department, with a paycheck half the size of his previous one. But it was better than nothing. He'd been working hard. He'd get up early, put on a suit, take the lunch I'd made him. He came back tired, but with a new determination in his eyes. He didn't drink, at least not in my presence. I could see how hard this new life was for him. He was the only one in his department with a college degree and 15 years of experience. He had to perform tasks that he felt were beneath his qualifications. But he didn't complain, at least not to me. Paige, on the other hand, was becoming increasingly irritable. Her job at the ad agency required long hours and constant stress. She'd come home late, often after dinner, which Noel and I ate alone. She would sit at the table with a glass of wine and silently pick at the food I'd left in the oven for her. I tried to find an approach to her. I cooked her favorite dishes, took an interest in her work, even fixed her favorite designer shoes, which she thought were hopelessly ruined. Nothing worked. She remained cold and distant, as if my presence in the house was physically painful to her. The tension grew every day. I could feel it in the glances they exchanged when they thought I couldn't see, in the quiet conversations behind closed doors, in the way Noel started avoiding being alone with me. Everything changed that Thursday. I remember every detail of that day as if it happened yesterday instead of months ago. The morning began as usual. Noel left for work by 8. Paige stayed home late. She had an important presentation scheduled for 11 o'clock, and she wanted to double-check everything. I was minding my own business, minor repairs to the garage that had been needing attention for a while. Around 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I opened it and saw a young man in a business suit with a folder in his hands. "Good afternoon," he said with a professional smile. "I'm looking for Mr. or Mrs. Baxter." "I'm Mr. Baxter," I replied. "What can I do for you?" He looked a little embarrassed. "I'm sorry, but I'm looking for Noel Baxter or his spouse. Noel's at work. Paige is at home, but she's getting ready for an important meeting. I'm his father. Is there anything I can do to help?" The young man hesitated, then handed me an envelope. "It's a notice from Valley Estate Investments. It's regarding payments under the leaseback agreement. Just hand it over, please." I took the envelope, and something in the expression on the young man's face made me wary. Was it something serious? He smiled strainedly. "Just a reminder of the deadline. Have a good day, sir." When he left, I twirled the envelope in my hands, fighting the temptation to open it. It was none of my business, I reminded myself. Their finances, their problems. I was only here for moral support. But then I remembered what Noel had said about them renting the house with an option to buy it back. Paige saying her paycheck was barely enough to cover the monthly payments. and about how I'd given them money last week, ostensibly to fix Noel's car, when in fact I suspected it had gone toward those very payments. I opened the envelope. Inside was an official notice of 3 months arrears and a warning of possible eviction if payments weren't made within 14 days. 3 months. They hadn't paid in 3 months, including the period when I was already living with them and giving them money. I was sitting at the kitchen table looking at that notice when Paige came downstairs. She was dressed in her best business suit with impeccable makeup and hair. A real businesswoman, ready to conquer the world. "What's this?" she asked, noticing the envelope in my hands. I silently handed her the paper. She ran her eyes over the text, and her face changed, first pale, then red with anger. "Did you open our mail?" was the first thing she said. "Yes." I didn't make any excuses. "3 months, Paige. Where did the money I gave you go?" She threw the paper on the table. "It's none of your business. It's my son and my house." "Of course it's my business." "Your house?" She laughed, but there was no mirth in her laughter. "You gave it to Noel, remember? It's our home now. A house you mortgaged and now you might lose." I tried to speak calmly, but I could feel the anger growing inside. "I gave you the money to make the payments. What happened to it?" She looked away. "We had other debts, more urgent." "What could be more urgent than a roof over your head?" "You don't understand." She was almost shouting now. "You with your stable pension and your savings. You've never been on the edge, never had to choose between paying one bill and another." "Because I've worked and saved all my life," I replied, feeling my voice rising as well. "Never spent more than I earned. I've never been involved in adventurous schemes with promises of quick riches." She gave me a searing glare. "Oh, here we go. The great Hugh Baxter and his sermons on labor and thrift. You're just like my father. You think that if you just work hard enough, everything will be all right. But you know what? The world has changed. It's not enough to just work hard enough now. You have to be smarter, faster, take risks." "And how has that risk worked out for you?" I asked quietly. She grabbed her bag and headed for the door. "I don't have time for this. I have a presentation in 40 minutes. "Paige," I stopped her, "we have to solve this problem now." "Solve it if you want," she tossed over her shoulder. "After all, you're the lifeguard here." She walked away, leaving me with a bitter sense of frustration and anxiety. I knew I had to talk to Noel. He needed to know how serious their situation was. I called his cell phone, but he didn't answer. I sent a text asking him to call me back as soon as he could. Then I sat down and waited. Noel came home earlier than usual, around 4 in the afternoon. I could tell by the look on his face that something bad had happened. "What happened?" I asked as he sank heavily onto the living room couch. "I've been fired," he said deafeningly. "Downsized, to be exact. Last one in, first one out." I sat down next to him, not knowing what to say. Another job loss in such a short time was a big blow. "I'm sorry, son." He nodded, staring into the void. "You know what the lousy part is? I'm not even surprised. It's like I expected this all along, like I'm cursed or something." "You're not cursed," I said firmly. "These are just hard times. We'll find a way out." He looked at me with a bitter grin. "We? Since when did my problems become your problems, Dad?" "Since you're my son," I answered simply. There's something else we need to talk about." I showed him the notice. He read it with a stone face, then closed his eyes as if in physical pain. "Does Paige know?" "Yes. She was here when it was delivered." He nodded, still not opening his eyes. "What did she say?" "Suaki is that you had more pressing debts." He finally looked at me. There were. Credit cards, health insurance, car. He sighed. "We thought we could get out of it, that I'd get a good job and we'd make up the house payments. And the money I gave you, I thought it would go towards those payments." He looked away. "Paige said the credit card collectors could sue if we didn't make at least the minimum payment, that the house could wait, that we still had time." I felt my insides tighten with disappointment. Not in Noel, in myself. I should have been more persistent, should have made sure the money went to what really mattered. "Noel," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and judicious, "you have 14 days left before the eviction process begins. You have to pay." "I know how much we have to pay." He jumped up from the couch. You think I don't understand the situation? You think I don't agonize over it every day? That's not what I meant. That's exactly what I meant. He started pacing around the room. You're always doing that, pointing out the obvious, as if I'm too stupid to realize it myself. Like I'm a child who can't take responsibility for his own actions. I'm trying to help with your money, with my advice, with my judgment. He stopped and looked at me. You know what I need right now? Not your money or your lectures. I need a father who's just there for me, who says, "It's going to be okay, son. I believe in you." I got up and walked over to him and put my hands on his shoulders. "It's going to be okay, son. I believe in you," I said quietly. "But we need a plan, a concrete plan to get out of this situation." He looked at me for a long moment. Then his shoulders slumped and he nodded. "You're right. Of course you're right." He walked back to the couch and sat down. "What do you suggest?" I sat down next to him. "First, I can give you money to pay off the house debt. That's the most urgent thing." "Dad, no objections. It's not charity, it's family. I'm helping my son like any father would." He nodded reluctantly. "Okay," chuckles. "Thank you. Second, we need to take care of your other debts. Credit cards, health insurance, everything else. Perhaps we could restructure." That's when we heard the front door open. Paige had come home, and from the sound of her footsteps, she was furious. She burst into the living room like a hurricane, pale, eyes blazing. "Your phone's off," she said to Noel. "I've been trying all day." "The battery's dead," he answered tiredly. "What's wrong? What happened?" She laughed hysterically. "Oh, nothing much. It's just that my boss just informed me that the agency is losing our biggest client. Guess whose account it was? Mine. And guess who they decided to fire first?" Noel covered his face with his hands. "God." "2 layoffs in one day," she shook her head. "Did we set a record, honey?" "Paige," I tried to interject. "We were just discussing a plan." "Oh, a plan," she turned to me. "Of course. The great Hugh Baxter always has a plan. How could I have forgotten?" "This is no time for sarcasm," I said firmly. "The situation is serious, but solvable. I'm willing to help with—" "With the money?" she interrupted me. "How nice of you. Why don't you just buy us new lives since you're so generous?" "Paige," Noel said warningly. "No, let him talk." She stepped toward me. "How much are you willing to give us this time? Enough to cover 3 months of house debt? Or maybe you'll pay off our credit cards too. What about a new car? This one's almost falling apart already." "That's enough," I said, feeling the anger boiling up inside. "I understand that you're upset, but that's no reason to—" "Don't you dare tell me how I should feel," she screamed. "You have no right. This is our life, our problems. We didn't ask you to come here and save us." "Actually, we did," I reminded her. "When Noel lost his job, when you couldn't pay your bills. It was a moment of weakness." "Dash," she turned to Noel. Tell him we can handle it on our own." Noel looked cornered, shifting his gaze from her to me and back again. "Paige, this is no time for pride. We really need help." "His help?" She pointed at me. "With his conditions? With his judgment? His 'I told you so'? I never said—" "Not directly." She turned to me again. "But it's written all over your face. Every time you look at us, at our house, at our stuff. You think we're losers? That we don't deserve this house?" "That's not true," I said quietly. "Dash, I just want you to be happy and safe. Then leave us alone." She grabbed the vase off the table and threw it on the floor. The vase shattered, splashing water and flowers. "We don't want you here. We don't want your money, your advice, your presence. If you stay, pay your rent, or get out." I stared at her, amazed at the fury in her voice, in her eyes. Then I shifted my gaze to Noel, expecting him to intervene, to say something. But he sat silent, his head down, avoiding my gaze. My heart clenched with pain. Not at Paige's words, I knew she was speaking out of fear and desperation, but from my son's silence, from his inability or unwillingness to take my side, even after all I'd tried to do for them. I slowly stood up. "All right," I said quietly, "I'll leave." "Dad." Noel finally spoke up, but I held up my hand to stop him. "It's okay. I understand. You need to figure this out on your own. I walked past them to the stairs up to the guest room and started packing up my things. It didn't take long. I never fully unpacked, as if subconsciously knowing that my stay here was temporary. When I came downstairs with my suitcase, Paige was no longer in the living room. Noel was standing by the front door, looking lost and miserable. "You don't have to leave," he said quietly. "She's just upset. Tomorrow she'll calm down." "It's not about her," I replied, looking him in the eye. "It's about you, Noel. The fact that you didn't say anything when she yelled at me. It's that you let her kick your father out of the house I built with my own hands." He looked away. I didn't know what to say. I was caught between two fires. "I understand." I put my hand on his shoulder. "But sometimes you have to make a choice, even if it's hard." I walked out of the house without looking back. I got in my pickup truck and drove back to my little cottage. All the way there, I thought about the house I left behind. The house where every nail, every beam was hammered in with my hands. The house where my son was born and raised. The house I gave him out of love, and he let turn into a battlefield. And about halfway to my cottage, I made a decision. The next morning, I called my old friend Oswald Pierce, one of the best realtors in Calabasas. We met at a coffee shop near my house. "Hugh, how many years? How many winters?" He shook my hand with his bear-like grip. "How you doing, you old devil?" "I've been better, Ozzy," I replied, ordering coffee for both of us. "I need your help." "Professional." He turned serious at once. "What's wrong?" I told him the situation about the house, about Noel and Paige, about how they'd mortgaged it and now they might lose it, about the legal loophole my lawyer had left that kept me in actual possession. "I want to sell the house," I finally said, quickly and quietly. Oswald whistled. "This is serious, Hugh. Are you sure? This is your son." "Who let his wife kick me out of the house I built?" I answered, feeling the bitterness rising in me again. A house they could now lose because of their irresponsibility. Oswald scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Technically, if you retained ownership, you could do it, but it wouldn't just be a sale, it would be a statement. Do you understand?" I nodded. "I understand, and I'm ready to make that statement." "Good." He pulled a notebook out of his briefcase. "What price do you want?" I named the amount, and his eyebrows went up. "That's a pretty aggressive price for the current market." "The house is worth it," I said firmly. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, half-acre lot, mountain views, and it's in great condition, despite being a little neglected. "Will you let me do the showings?" I shook my head. "No showings, no listings. Find a buyer who is willing to buy it based on photos and a virtual tour. That will narrow down the pool of potential buyers." "Then find one." I looked him straight in the eye. "I know you can do it, Ozzy. You have clients who are looking for just such homes and are willing to pay a premium for speed and privacy." He nodded slowly. "There are a couple options. Investors who are buying up properties in the neighborhood, but they usually offer below market price." "Not this time," I said firmly. "The price is fixed." Oswald studied me for a long moment, then smiled. "You always were a stubborn bastard, Hugh. All right, I'll see what I can do." We struck hands and he walked away, leaving me with a cup of cold coffee and a heavy feeling in my chest. I had just begun a process that would forever change my relationship with my son, but it was too late to back out. 3 days later, Oswald called me. "I have a buyer," he said without preamble, "a firm called Archon Investments. They are willing to pay full price, but they want to close the deal quickly." 2 weeks. 2 weeks? I was surprised. Is that possible? Technically, yes, but we're going to have to move fast. He paused. "Hugh, are you sure you want to do this? Without warning Noel?" I closed my eyes, feeling conflicting emotions fighting inside me. Part of me wanted to call my son, to explain, to give him a chance to make things right. But the other part, still wounded by his silence, his inability to take my side, wanted to teach him a lesson. "I'm sure," I said finally. "Let's do it." The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of paperwork, meetings with lawyers and bankers. Felix Prescott, my longtime lawyer, reviewed the paperwork and confirmed that I had every right to sell the house, even though Noel thought it was his. "Legally," he said, handing me the last of the papers to sign. "But morally, Hugh, do you realize what you're doing? I do, I replied, signing the papers with a firm hand. The day the deal closed, I sat in Oswald's office, watching the Archon Investments representative, a young woman, with cold eyes and a determined chin, sign the final papers. Congratulations, Mr. Baxter, she said, shaking my hand. The house is now officially owned by Archon Investments. I nodded, feeling a strange emptiness inside. Oswald handed me a check, $1 million, a sum that would change my life, but probably ruin my relationship with my son forever. After the sale of the house, I spent a few days in a strange emotional daze. The $1 million check was in the safe, and I had completed all the necessary paperwork at the bank, but there was no sense of triumph or relief, only emptiness and a vague feeling that I had done something irreparable. Oswald called twice, asking how I was holding up, offering me a drink. I refused. I didn't want to see anyone, not even old friends, especially those who knew about my decision and could make me doubt its correctness. Felix Prescott, my lawyer, was more persistent. He came to my house with a packet of documents that demanded my attention. Technically, it's legal, he said, sitting at my kitchen table. But morally, Hugh, are you sure you don't want to call your son? Warn him? About what? I asked, signing the last of the papers. That I'd sold the house he thought was his? That they'd be evicted in 30 days? At least that they'd have to find a new place to live, Felix said quietly without judgment, but I could still feel his disapproval. They already knew they could lose the house, I answered, trying to sound confident. They hadn't paid the rent in 3 months. What had changed? Just the name of the owner, Offham, and the fact that the new owner wouldn't be as lenient as the old one. I put my pen down and looked at him. You think I should have just forgiven them? Let them continue to behave irresponsibly? They're adults, Felix. It's time they realize the consequences of their actions. He's collected the papers and stood up. It's not my call, Hugh. I'm just doing my job. But as your friend, I hope you know what you're doing. After he left, I sat on the porch for a long time, looking out at the sunset. Somewhere out there on the north side of town, my son and his wife continued to live their ordinary lives, unaware of the time bomb that was about to explode beneath them. Part of me wanted to warn them, to give them a chance to prepare, but the other part, still hurt and angry, wanted them to experience the same shock and humiliation I had experienced. A week after selling the house, Oswald called me again. The Archon company has sent an eviction notice, he said without preamble. 30 days starting today. I gripped the phone tighter. Had they gotten it yet? They should have. Courier delivery, hand delivered. Hugh, I still think you should. Thank you for the information, I interrupted him. Keep me posted if there's any news. I hung up the phone and went to the window. It was a sunny, cloudless day, as it often is in Calabasas. Somewhere out there, in the house I had built with my own hands, my son and his wife were receiving news that would turn their lives upside down. I didn't want to be there when it happened. I didn't want to see their faces, hear their voices, but I couldn't just sit around and wait either. So I got in my car and drove into town, with no specific goal in mind, just to be on the move. I drove past their neighborhood, not intending to stop, but something made me turn onto a familiar street. I parked a safe distance away, where I couldn't be seen from the house, but I could watch the front door. For about an hour, nothing happened. Then a delivery man on a motorcycle drove up, went up on the porch and rang the doorbell. After a minute, the door was opened by Paige. I couldn't see her face from this distance, but I could tell from her body language that she was tense. The courier handed her an envelope. She signed and closed the door. I continued to wait, not knowing what exactly. Maybe screams that would be heard even outside, or someone running out of the house in a panic. But nothing of the sort was happening. The house stood quiet and outwardly calm, just as it had before. 20 minutes later, Noel's car pulled into the driveway. He got out, looking tired even from a distance, and walked slowly up to the porch. The door opened before he could get his keys. Paige was apparently waiting for him. They quickly exchanged a few words, and she handed him an envelope. He took it, opened it, and started reading right on the doorstep. Even from where I was sitting, I could see his body change. His shoulders slumped, his head drooped. They both went into the house, and the door closed. I continued to sit in the car, feeling both an observer and a participant in the unfolding drama. Part of me wanted to go over to the house, explain, maybe even help. The other part wanted to drive away and never come back. In the end, I chose the compromise of staying and watching, but not getting involved. For now. An hour later, the door opened again, and Noel came out. He got into his car and drove off. His face, which I caught a glimpse of, was pale and tense. I decided to return home. There I spent a restless evening, constantly checking my phone, waiting for the call that would inevitably follow. But the phone was silent. The next morning I drove to the house again, driven by a strange mixture of guilt and curiosity. This time I was more cautious, parking farther away and using the binoculars I kept in the glove compartment for birdwatching, a hobby I'd picked up since retirement. The house looked as usual, but I noticed Paige's car wasn't in the driveway. Perhaps she'd already left for work, or maybe they'd both left to look for a new place to live. I watched the house intermittently that day, leaving and returning so as not to attract the attention of the neighbors. I saw Noel return around 3 in the afternoon, as Paige arrived a little later. I saw a car with a law firm logo pull up to the house, and a man in a suit spend about an hour inside. I waited for the call. I was sure they would contact me as soon as they realized what had happened, but the phone was stubbornly silent. On the third day after the eviction notice was delivered, my phone finally rang. The number was an unfamiliar one, but with a local area code. Hugh Baxter, I answered, trying to keep my voice neutral. Mr. Baxter? The voice was unfamiliar too, male, professionally polite. My name is Elliot Grange, and I'm the attorney for your son, Noel Baxter. What can I do for you, Mr. Grange? Mr. Baxter, my client has received an eviction notice from Archon Investments, which claims to be the new owner of the house. We're trying to get a handle on the situation, and we found out that the house was sold by you. That's correct, I confirmed. There was a pause as if the lawyer expected me to say something else. When I remained silent, he continued. Mr. Baxter, my client was convinced that the house belonged to him. He has the deeds to prove it. We don't understand how you could sell a property that doesn't belong to you. I suggest you take a closer look at those documents, Mr. Grange, I replied calmly, especially the retention of title clause. I think you will find that legally I had every right to dispose of the house as I saw fit. Again the pause, longer this time. Yeah, we'll look into the matter, he said at last. But regardless of the legal technicalities, Mr. Baxter, do you not think it unusual for you to sell the house your son lives in without his knowledge? Perhaps, I agreed. Just as it's unusual to kick your own father out of the house he built with his own hands. I understand, he said, a note of disapproval in his voice. Mr. Baxter, my client would like to meet with you personally to discuss the situation. Perhaps we could find a compromise that, tell my son I'm willing to meet with him, without you or his wife, just him and me. I'll convey your condition, the lawyer replied dryly. Good day, Mr. Baxter. After this conversation, I felt strangely relieved. The first contact had been made, the first cards had been dealt. Now I had to wait for Noel's reaction. But the next call I received was not from my son. The phone rang late at night, just as I was about to go to bed. Paige's number popped up on the screen. I hesitated before answering it. I wasn't sure I was ready for this conversation. But finally I pressed the dial button. Yes, ? I said, deliberately not calling her by name. How could you? Her voice shook with rage and, I think, tears. How could you do this to us? To your own son? Hello, Paige, I said calmly. I suppose you've gotten your eviction notice. Don't play with me, she shouted. You know what we got. You know what you did. You sold our house. Technically, it was my house, I corrected. As you must have found out by now by examining the paperwork. It was a fraud. Her voice trailed off into a shriek. You made Noel sign the papers without explaining what they meant. I didn't make him sign anything, and the terms were clearly spelled out. It's not my fault you didn't bother to read the documents carefully before you took out a loan against a house that didn't belong to you. She was silent for a moment, apparently trying to collect her thoughts. What do you want? She finally asked more quietly. Money? An apology? What? Nothing, I answered honestly. I just wanted you to understand what it's like to be kicked out of your own home. Did you You did it out of revenge? Her voice was full of disbelief. Because of that stupid argument? Because I told you to pay your rent? Not just because of that, I said. Because of the way you treated the house I gave you. Because of the way you handled that gift. Because of the way Noel let you talk to me and didn't say a word in my defense. He was shocked, she exclaimed. He didn't expect me to say such a thing. What did you want him to do? I wanted him to be a man, I answered quietly. That he would stand up and say, "This is my father, and you will not talk to him like that in my house." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then I heard a muffled sound, as if she'd covered the receiver with her hand to talk to someone nearby. With Noel, probably. When she spoke again, her voice sounded different, less hysterical, more calculating. "Listen, Hugh, I understand that you're upset. We've all said too much. But that's no reason to ruin our lives. We can fix this. Why don't we meet and talk about this like adults? I already told your lawyer I'm willing to meet with Noel. Just him. Without you." "That's not possible," she cut him off. "We're family. We decide everything together." "Then we have nothing to talk about. Hugh, be reasonable. You can't just throw us out on the street. Where are we going to go? Where are we going to live?" "That's not my problem," I said, surprised at my own coldness. "Ashun, you have 30 days to find a new place to live. Use them wisely." You're a monster," she whispered. "How could you do this to your own son?" "Ask yourself how you could do that to your husband's father," I replied and hung up. I sat in the dark, staring at the silenced phone, a strange sense of devastation mixed with a grim satisfaction. I had finally told her everything I thought, showed her I wouldn't let her treat me like that again. Maybe it was petty, perhaps it was cruel, but it felt right at the time. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. This time it was Noel. Dad. His voice sounded tired and lost. "We need to talk. I'm listening." "Not on the phone. In person. Can I come to your place tomorrow?" I paused, weighing the situation. "Okay. Just you, Noel?" "No Paige." "Yeah, I get it." He took a deep breath. "Thank you." As I hung up the phone, I felt strangely calm. Tomorrow I'll see my son. Tomorrow we'll talk. Really talk. Maybe for the first time in years. And whatever happens next, it will be a new chapter in our relationship. I went to bed, but sleep wouldn't come. I thought about the house I'd sold, every nail I'd hammered in with my own hands, the rooms where my wife and little Noel had once laughed. Now that house belonged to strangers, to a cold corporation that saw it only as a line item on a balance sheet. Had I done the right thing? Did I have the moral right, even though legally everything was legal? These questions swirled around in my head, keeping me awake. But one thing I knew for sure, there was no turning back. The house was sold. The money had been received. The eviction notice had been delivered. All that was left was to live with the consequences of my decision. Noel came to see me the next day as promised. I waited for him on the porch of my little cottage, watching him park the car and walk slowly toward the house. He looked drained with dark circles under his eyes as if he hadn't slept in several nights. In a way he had. The news of the house sale must have hit him harder than I'd expected. "Hi, Dad," he said, coming up the stairs. His voice sounded strained, like he was struggling to stay calm. "Hello, Noel." I gestured for him to come in. "Coffee?" "Please." We went into the kitchen and I set about making coffee, giving us both time to collect our thoughts. Noel sat down at the table, tapping his fingers nervously on the countertop. "Did you really sell the house?" he finally asked, looking at my back. I turned to him, holding 2 cups in my hands. "Yes. Why?" He sounded genuinely confused. "Because of what Paige said? Because I didn't intervene?" I set the cups on the table and sat down across from him. "Some of it. But that's not the only reason. Do you remember why I gave you this house?" He shrugged. "Because it was too big for you alone after Mom died." "Yes. And because I wanted you to have a safe place to start a family, a home I built with my own hands with love and care." I took a sip of coffee. "And what did you do with it?" "Mortgaged it to invest in dubious schemes. Stopped paying your bills. Got to the point where you were about to be evicted. We tried to deal—" "No, Noel, you didn't. You turned a blind eye to the problems until they were too big to ignore. And even then, you didn't come to me for help. I learned everything from my neighbor. He lowered his head, recognizing the rightness of my words. I should have told you, I know. Just pride, I guess. Pride, I repeated thoughtfully. You know, your mother always said we were too much alike. Both stubborn, both with exorbitant pride. For a moment there was silence in the room, broken only by the ticking of the wall clock. What now? Noel asked at last. We have less than 30 days left. Where do we go? It's your decision, I answered. I can't and won't make it for you. You could have helped, he said, a note of accusation in his voice. You got $1 million for a house that cost half as much when you built it. The real estate market in Calabasas is up, I said calmly, and I could help. You, not you and Paige. He looked up sharply. What does that mean? It means that I've seen how she affects you, how she spends money you don't have, how she pushes you to make decisions you would never make on your own. You don't know her, he objected, but without much conviction. I know enough, and I know you. You're not the man you've become around her. Noel finished his coffee in one gulp and set the cup down with such force that I wondered if it would crack. So that's what this is about? You sold the house to ruin my marriage? No, I shook my head. I sold the house because you both have shown that you don't value it and you don't deserve it. What happens to your marriage is your business. He stood up, visibly shaking with contained anger. Thanks for the coffee, Dad, and for the life lesson. I'll remember it. With that, he walked out, slamming the door so hard that the glass in the windows rattled. I sat at the table staring at the two cups, my half-full cup and his, empty. After Noel left, I'd had a few rough days. Doubts gnawed at me. Did I do the right thing? Had I gone too far? Had I irrevocably destroyed my relationship with my only son? I tried to distract myself by working in the garden, reading, even went to a meeting of my group of pensioners. But my thoughts kept returning to Noel, to the house, to what might happen to them now. On the 5th day after our conversation, Oswald called me. Hugh, he said without preamble, do you know what is happening to your son and his wife? No, I answered, feeling my insides tighten. What's going on? I got a call from the Archon representative. They were doing a pre-possession inspection of the house and found something strange going on. Screaming, breaking dishes. Neighbors even called the police. I sank into the chair, feeling weak in my legs. The police? Oh, God. It's all right, Oswald hastened to reassure me. No one was hurt, no one was arrested. But things are heating up, Hugh. Perhaps you should intervene. How? I asked tiredly. They've made it clear they don't want my help. I don't know, he sighed. But they're still your family. After that conversation, I couldn't find a place to go. Part of me wanted to go to them immediately. Another part reminded me that it would only make things worse. In the end, I decided to do what I had done before, observe from afar. I parked in the same spot where I sat the day they received their eviction notice. The house looked quiet, but I noticed that the curtains were drawn and only Noel's car was parked in the driveway. Paige's car was nowhere to be seen. I sat there for several hours, nothing happening. Then around 5 p.m., a cab pulled up. Paige came out of the house with 2 large suitcases. She yelled something through the open door, but I couldn't make out the words. Then she got into the cab and drove off. I was left sitting in the car, not knowing what to do. Part of me wanted to go to Noel, to make sure he was okay, but I wasn't sure he'd be happy to see me. In the end, I decided to drive home. Whatever was going on between them, it was their problem, their fight. My interference could only complicate things. That evening, I received a call from Vivian Holbrook, the same neighbor who had first informed me of Noel's problems. Mr. Baxter, she said without preamble. You need to know what's going on with your son. What's going on? I asked, already guessing what this was about. His wife left. She packed her things and left in a cab. They had a terrible fight before. The whole neighborhood heard it. She was yelling something about how he ruined her life, how she didn't deserve it. And Noel? What about him? He hasn't left the house since. The lights are on, but there's no more noise. I tried ringing the doorbell to bring him dinner. but he won't answer. I thanked her for calling and promised to look into it. But instead of going straight to my son's house, I decided to give him time. Maybe he needed to be alone, to process what was happening. I knew my son. In difficult moments, he was always withdrawn, just like me. I didn't hear from him for 3 days. I called, but he didn't answer. I sent messages, but they went unanswered. On the fourth day, I couldn't bear it and drove to the house. The driveway was empty, no Noel's car, no Paige's car. I rang the doorbell, but no one answered. I walked around the house, looked in the windows, and it was empty. It looked like the house had been abandoned. I was about to leave when I noticed my neighbor, Vivian Holbrook, waving at me from her front porch. I went over to her. "Aunt." "He left yesterday morning," she said, inviting me in for a cup of tea. "He loaded some bags into the car and drove off. Didn't say where he was going." "And his wife? Did she come back?" "No." Vivian shook her head. "I didn't see her after that day." I thanked her for the information and went home. There was a message waiting for me on the answering machine. Noel had called while I was gone. "Dad, it's me." His voice sounded muffled, like he was speaking from far away. "I just wanted to tell you that I moved out of the house. Rented an apartment in Van Nuys. Not a godsend, but a roof over my head. Paige is gone. For good, I guess. Said she couldn't be with me after everything that happened. Blamed me for failing to protect her, to keep us stable. You must be glad to hear that. After all, you always thought she wasn't right for me. Well, now you can celebrate. We're broken up. I'm alone and without a home. Lesson learned. I hope you're happy." The message cut off and I stood staring at the blinking answering machine, not knowing what to feel. Relief that Paige was gone, worry for my son, guilt for my part in all of this. I tried calling Noel back, but he didn't answer. Then I left him a message, short, discreet, offering to meet and talk when he was ready. A week went by. Noel didn't call, didn't visit. I began to worry in earnest. Finally, I decided to find him myself. He hadn't left an address in Van Nuys, but I remembered he had a social networking page. I rarely used it, but now it seemed like the only way to contact him. I created a new account, found Noel's profile, and sent him a message asking to meet. To my surprise, he responded almost immediately, agreeing to meet me at a cafe in Van Nuys the next day. The cafe was a small, cozy place not far from a busy street. I arrived early and took a table in the corner where I could see the front door. Noel showed up at exactly the right time, slim and unshaven, but sober and neatly dressed. "Hi, Dad," he said, sitting down across from me. "Hello, son." I looked at him carefully. "How are you?" He shrugged. "Alive. That's something, right?" We ordered coffee and sat in silence for a while, not knowing where to start the conversation. "I heard you and Paige broke up," I said finally. "Yeah," he nodded. "She filed for divorce. Said I wasn't the man she wanted to marry. That I couldn't give her the life I promised." "I'm sorry," I said, and I really thought so. Despite all the problems Paige brought, I didn't want my son to suffer. "Really?" He looked at me questioningly. "You never made it a secret that you didn't like her. That doesn't mean I wanted your divorce. I wanted you to be happy." "Happy?" He grinned bitterly. "You know, I thought I was happy with her. At least in the beginning. She was so bright, so full of life. Next to her, I felt special." I kept quiet, giving him a chance to talk. But then things changed. Or maybe it didn't change. It just revealed what had always been there. Her irrepressible desire for more. More money, more things, more status. I tried to keep up with her demands, I really did. But at some point I realized I could never give her enough. He took a sip of coffee and continued. "You know what she said when she left? Your father's right. You've never been man enough. Not for me, not for him." He looked me in the eye. "Is that true, Dad? Do you really think so?" I felt everything inside clench with pain for him. For both of us. "No," I said firmly. "It's not true. You're my son, and I've always been proud of you. Even when we disagreed, even when I was disappointed in your decisions, I never doubted that you were the man." He looked at me for a long time, as if trying to find the truth in my eyes. "Then why did you do it? Why did you sell the house knowing it would ruin my life?" I didn't think it would ruin your life, I answered honestly. I thought it would shake you up, make you look at the situation in a new way. And maybe it worked. You're here without Paige, sober, looking for answers. You had no right to decide for me, he said, but without the same hotness. Maybe, but I did what I thought was right at the time. We were silent again. It was starting to rain outside the window, a rare occurrence in Calabasas, especially at this time of year. I found a job, Noel said suddenly. Not what I was doing before, but something close. A small firm doing digital marketing for local businesses. The pay is modest, but it's enough to live on. That's good, I nodded. I'm happy for you. I've been thinking a lot these past few days, he continued, about how Paige and I got to this point, about how I let her spend money we didn't have, how I was afraid to object, afraid of conflict, how I used alcohol to avoid problems instead of solving them. He looked at me. You were right, Dad. I didn't take responsibility. Not for my life, not for my marriage, not for the house you gave us. I reached out and put my hand on his shoulder. We all make mistakes, son. It's important to learn from them. I'm learning, he smiled weakly. It was a costly lesson, though. We finished our coffee, and he told me more about his new life. The apartment, small but clean, the job he was starting to like, the support group for people with alcohol addiction he'd started attending. I haven't had a drink in 2 weeks, he said proudly. That's longer than in the last 3 years. I'm proud of you, I said, and I really thought so. When it was time to say goodbye, he suddenly asked, Dad, I realize you did what you thought was right. But be honest, don't you regret selling the house? I wondered. It was a complicated question that had no easy answer. I regret hurting you, I said finally. But not the decision itself. That house was a symbol of everything that was wrong with your life. The debts, the lies, the addiction to Paige and the alcohol. Maybe it would be easier for you to start over without it. He nodded, accepting my answer. Maybe. But it still hurts to think that the house where I grew up now belongs to strangers. It's just a building, Noel. Memories stay with us no matter where we live. We went outside. The rain had stopped, but the air was fresh and humid. You could come over for dinner on Sunday, I suggested. It wouldn't be a big deal, just to sit and talk. He hesitated. I don't know, Dad. I need some time. This whole thing, it's too fresh. It's too painful. I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. I understand. The offer still stands when you're ready. We shook hands formally as business partners, not as father and son. Then he got into his car and drove away, and I stood on the sidewalk staring after him. As I drove home, I reflected on our conversation. It had gone better than I'd expected, but worse than I'd hoped. Noel had started to admit his mistakes, started to change for the better. But there was still a gulf between us, created by my decision to sell the house. Would we ever be able to bridge it? I didn't know. At home, there was a message waiting for me on my answering machine. It was Paige, and her voice sounded very different from the last time we'd spoken. Not angry, but almost pleading. Hugh, it's Paige. I know you probably don't want to talk to me, and I understand. But I need your help. Yep, I'm in trouble. Big problems. Please call me back when you get this message. Please. I stood looking at the answering machine, not knowing what to do. Part of me wanted to delete the message immediately and forget about it. The other part, the part that always felt responsible for loved ones, even if they hurt, made me wonder. What had happened to Paige? Why did she turn to me and not Noel? And should I respond to her request for help after everything that had happened? I sat back in my chair looking at my phone and realized I was facing a choice that could further complicate an already difficult situation, but also a choice that could answer the questions that had been plaguing me since the day I decided to sell the house. I reached for the phone, not yet knowing what I would say if Paige answered, but feeling like I should at least hear her out. Not for her sake, but for Noel's sake, and maybe for myself. It's been 3 months since I sold Noel's house to Archon Investments. 3 months that have changed my entire life. I no longer live in a small cottage in Calabasas. Now my home is a small, one-story bungalow in Malibu, just 300 feet from the ocean. Not on the first line, of course. Even with $1 million, I could not afford such a luxury. but close enough to hear the sound of the surf at night and feel the salty breeze when I sit on my new veranda. The house cost me $400,000, half of what I got for the mansion. The rest of the money I put into an account, some of it set aside for emergencies, some of it invested. Felix Prescott, my trusty lawyer, helped with all the formalities. He didn't approve of my decision to sell Noel's house, but he did his job perfectly. "Are you sure you want to live so far away from your son?" he asked as we closed the deal on the bungalow. Malibu is not around the corner from Calabasas. "That's exactly why I chose it," I replied. I needed distance. A physical space that would reflect the emotional gulf between Noel and me. I couldn't live in the same city anymore, drive past his neighborhood, risk running into him at the supermarket or gas station. It was too painful. The wounds too fresh. Now I'm sitting on the veranda, looking out at the ocean in the distance. The sun is slipping towards sunset, coloring the sky and water in shades of orange and purple. Malibu has stunning sunsets. Elaine would have loved them. She always dreamed of a house by the sea, but we never could afford it in her lifetime. Too busy building a career, raising a son, creating stability. Ironically, I only found that stability after I lost her, and now I'm sitting alone in the house she dreamed of, with no way to share this moment with her. I haven't heard from Noel in almost 2 months. After our conversation at a coffee shop in Van Nuys, we exchanged a couple short messages. He informed me that he was officially divorced from Paige, that he'd made progress at his new job, that he still wasn't drinking. I replied that I was happy for him, that I was proud of his progress, but it didn't go any further than that formal exchange of pleasantries. Paige, on the other hand, was more persistent. After that answering machine message, she called twice more, each time with increasing desperation in her voice. The last time, she mentioned some debts, some problems with people she owed money to, hinted at threats. I didn't call back. Her problems were no longer my problems. Maybe it was cruel, but after everything she'd done to my son, to our home, to our family, I couldn't bring myself to feel sympathy for her. She made her choice. Now let her live with its consequences. The neighbor to my right, an elderly artist named Gordon, comes out onto his veranda with a cup of tea. We nod to each other, our daily evening ritual. Gordon has never been married, has no children. Sometimes I envy his freedom, his lack of attachments that can hurt. "Great sunset today," he says, leaning against the railing of his veranda. "As always," I reply. "But each one is unique in its own way, if you look closely." A wise old man, that Gordon. In the 2 months we've been neighbors, I've learned that he taught art at some college in New York before retiring and moving here. Now he paints the ocean at different times of day, in different weather. He says he never tires of the sight. "You're a builder, right?" he asks, sipping his tea. I nod. "Retired now. Built many houses?" "Enough." "Did you build for yourself too?" I nod. "A mansion in Calabasas. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, patio overlooking the mountains. And you traded it for this bungalow?" There's no judgment in his voice, just curiosity. "Not exactly," I pause, not knowing how much to tell. "I gave that house to my son, and then I sold it." Gordon nods understandingly and doesn't ask any more questions. Another reason I like the man, he knows when to stay out of other people's business. Evening slowly descends on Malibu. I walk into the house and make myself a simple dinner. Steak, potatoes, salad. All these years I hadn't had much interest in cooking. It was Elaine's domain. But after she died, I had to learn. Now I even find a kind of pleasure in it, in simple, straightforward actions that have a predictable result. Sliced, seasoned, fried, you get a delicious dinner. No surprises, no disappointments. Not like with people. With people, you never know what to expect. After dinner, I sit in a chair with a book. I read a biography of Frank Lloyd Wright, a great architect whose work has always inspired me. He was also a complicated man with a complicated relationship with his loved ones. Maybe that's a trait of all builders. We understand buildings better than people. The phone rings just as I'm about to go to bed. It's almost 11 p.m. Too late for a regular call. I look at the screen, an unfamiliar number. For a moment, I think it might be Paige from the new phone, and I almost don't pick up. But something compels me to answer. Hugh Baxter speaking. Dash, Mr. Baxter? It's a man's voice, unfamiliar. This is Dr. Alan Foster from Providence Cedars Sinai Medical Center. I'm calling about your son, Noel Baxter. I feel a chill inside. What's wrong with him? He was in a car accident 2 hours ago. He's in stable condition now, but how bad? I interrupt, already looking for my car keys. Multiple fractures, concussion, internal bleeding, which we stopped. He's conscious and gave us your number as an emergency contact. I'm clutching the phone so tight my knuckles are white. I'm on my way right now. Okay, Mr. Baxter. We'll be waiting for you. The drive from Malibu to the hospital in West Hollywood takes almost an hour, even at night when there's no traffic. I'm driving in a fog, my mind is jumbled, my heart is racing. My son is in the hospital. My son, who I haven't really spoken to in 2 months, is lying there with broken bones and a concussion. And he named me as his contact, not Paige, not a friend, not a coworker. Me. What does that mean? An act of reconciliation? An admission that, despite everything that's happened, I'm still his father? Or just because there was no one else to name? I park outside the hospital and walk quickly to the emergency room. The nurse behind the counter directs me to the ICU. I'm greeted in front of the door by the very same doctor. Foster, a young man with tired eyes and a reassuring smile. Dash, Mr. Baxter, he shakes my hand. I'm glad you got here so quickly. How's he doing? Stable, like I said. Pain's under control. We performed surgery to stop the internal bleeding and stabilize the fractured femur. It'll take a long rehab, but a full recovery is possible. Can I see him? Sure. He's on heavy painkillers, so he may not be thinking clearly. And please, just for a moment. He needs to rest. I nod and go into the room. Noel is lying in a hospital bed, pale, with lots of tubes and wires connected to various machines. His right leg is in a cast, suspended from a special structure. His face is bruised and abraded, his head partially bandaged. He looks small and fragile, like he did when he broke his arm falling off his bicycle when he was 8 years old. I walk over quietly and sit down on the chair next to the bed. His eyes are closed, his breathing even. I don't know if he's asleep or just resting, but I don't dare disturb him. I just sit next to him, looking at his face, so similar to Elaine's. After a few minutes, his eyelids flutter open and he slowly opens his eyes. His gaze is unfocused, but gradually clears as he notices me. Dash, Dad? His voice is hoarse, weak. You came. Oh, Anon. Of course I came, I say, trying to keep my voice calm. How are you feeling? He tries to grin but grimaces in pain. Like I've been hit by a car, which is pretty much true. What happened? I was coming home from work. Some drunk driver ran a red light. He closes his eyes. Ironic, huh? I quit drinking, and I almost get killed by a drunk driver. I squeeze his hand, gently, afraid of hurting him. The important thing is that you're alive. He nods, then looks at me again. Thank you for coming. I know it was unexpected. You're my son, I say simply. Where else would I go? We are silent for a while. Only the beeping of the monitors and the muffled voices of the nursing staff in the hallway can be heard in the silence. I heard you moved, he says finally. Yeah, bought a little house in Malibu. By the ocean? I can hear a faint smile in his voice, like Mom always wanted. Yeah, I feel a lump come up in my throat. She would have loved it there. There's silence again. Then he says softly, almost in a whisper, I miss her. I miss her too, I say. Every day. His eyelids grow heavy with fatigue and medication. You need to rest, I say, rising. I'll come back tomorrow. Wait. He tries to hold my hand, but the movement hurts him. There's something I need to tell you. I sit down again. I listen. I understand now, he says, fighting sleep. Why you sold the house. I've been angry with you for so long, but now lying here, I understand. You wanted me to take responsibility for my life, to be a man I could be proud of. Noel. No, let me finish. He shakes his head stubbornly, like he used to do as a child. I've been thinking about you and me all these months, about how you built your mom's house with your own hands, about how I let Paige modify it, mortgage it, and then kick you out of it. He pauses, gathering his strength. I don't blame you for what you did. I'd probably do the same thing if I were you. I don't know what to say. All these months I've been waiting for an apology, a confession, something to heal the wound between us. And now I've finally gotten it. And all I feel is a deep, overpowering sadness. We both have a lot to be sorry for, I finally said. But the only thing that matters now is your recovery. He nods, his eyes almost closed. Stay a little longer, he murmurs, until I fall asleep. I sit beside him, holding his hand until his breathing becomes deep and steady. Then I gently release his hand and walk out of the room. Dr. Foster is waiting for me in the hallway. How is he? I ask. Not bad considering the circumstances, but he's got a long road to recovery ahead of him. He lives alone? Yeah, as far as I know. That's a problem. Once he's discharged, he'll need constant care for weeks, maybe months. Physical therapy, dressings, help with daily activities. I nod, already realizing what he's getting at. Is there someone who can take care of him? The doctor asks. Relatives, friends? Yes, I answer. I'll take care of him. When I leave the hospital, I get in my car, but I don't start the engine. I just sit there, staring at the glowing windows of the building where my son lies. The son I almost lost, first to my pride, now to an accident. Life is too short for grudges and revenge. Elaine always told me that, but I was too stubborn to listen. It took death, losing my home, and almost losing my son for me to finally realize. I pull out my phone and text Gordon, warning him I won't be home for a few days. Then I open the real estate listings app and start looking. Not a house, just an apartment in West Hollywood, near the hospital for starters. Noel will need somewhere to recuperate after he's discharged, and his little apartment in Van Nuys won't be the place for that. I don't know if he'll accept my help. I don't know if I'm ready to forgive him completely, or if he's ready to forgive me. I don't know if we can ever go back to the relationship we had before all of this. But I know I want to try. For Noel, for Elaine, and for me. I start the car and pull out onto the night road. It's a long drive home to the ocean, and tomorrow an even longer drive back to my son. But for the first time in many months, this journey doesn't feel like a burden. It's just part of the life I've chosen, a life in which I'm finally ready to move forward. The phone in the passenger seat pings, a new message. I don't look at it, focused on the road. It can wait until I get home. Right now, the important thing is to get there safely and get a good night's sleep before tomorrow, the day I'll see my son again.